He was the last of the three major candidates to announce he's running for San Francisco District Attorney. Criminal defense attorney John Hamasaki bills himself as the true progressive in this race, and he's gaining support from those disappointed that Chesa Boudin was recalled. How will his policies differ from Chesa Boudin's?
Well, we continue our conversation with the candidates this afternoon by welcoming John Hamasaki to our studios. Thank you so much, John, for being here. Always a pleasure. You admitted to me that this was a last-minute decision. So tell us all why you were running for San Francisco DA.
I think it was a culmination of things. It was, nobody was really stepping up. There was a really big feeling in the city that we needed to take the city back. Right now, we're under essentially a one party or one administration rule. And I think a lot of people felt shut out of the process. So after approaching others, I was approached and pushed, prodded, begged, and now I'm here. But it was quite a ride.
All right, you say you are going to be a reform-minded prosecutor if you are in fact elected. Obviously, you are going to get a lot of comparisons to Chesa Boudin. You are labeling yourself as the true progressive here in this race. But with that being said, how do you plan to distinguish yourself from Chesa Boudin, obviously ousted from office?
Sure. Well, for one, I'm not Chesa Boudin 2.0. I'm John Hamasaki 1.0. I really respect a lot of the work that other prosecutors have done, both in San Francisco and around reform. We're trying to change the system in a way that protects public safety, first and foremost, while also setting people up for success after they work their way through the criminal justice system. Because for too long, we've just relied on convictions and imprisonment, and people end up in a cycle of recidivism. If we can give them the tools through job education, training, substance abuse treatment, and mental health treatment, so they don't reoffend, we're addressing future public safety. Okay,
so give us some specific policy proposals. What are you talking about when you say you want to invest in smart public safety policies? What does that mean?
Sure. What it means is, for too long we've dealt with crime on the back end after everything has already gone wrong. It ends up in the prosecutor's office because the harm has already been done. So what we can do is reinvest in communities that have been plagued by crime and violence in a way that prevents the harm from actually happening. And so what that looks like is when somebody ends up in the criminal justice system, we don't just say, okay, the first answer is conviction and imprisonment. That's been the traditional answer. What we need to do is give people the tools to lift themselves up out of the difficult situation that they found themselves in and end up in a situation where they're not reoffending.
But a lot of people are going to hear that, and they're going to sort of think, well, that's a good big picture strategy. But the reality on the ground right now is that you have sometimes folks who've committed violent crimes, who are repeat offenders, who are being let back out onto the streets to reoffend. And there's a lot of frustration about that. Do you understand that frustration, and how do you address that if you, in fact, are elected district attorney?
Right. And so I think we've had this big discussion in San Francisco over the last year about, the crime rates, but also the feeling people are existing with, right? People do not feel safe in San Francisco right now, regardless of what the crime rates are. And so we have to address public safety in a way where people feel that when people break the law, do harm to others, they're held accountable. And that can mean anything from, at the low end, diversion, at the more serious crimes you're talking about, incarceration. Incarceration is part of our system. And so it's not a revolving door of justice. What we want to do is have people go through the process. If they have to be incarcerated, they'll be incarcerated. But we want to give them the tools to move forward after that position.
John, you and I first met when you were a San Francisco Police Commissioner, 2018 until April. And during that time, you were known as sort of being the fiery police commissioner, very active on social media, namely Twitter, especially when you were in that role. And that brings me to my next question, because you have had some quite controversial tweets, including one in which you called for both the defunding of the police and the district attorney's office. And here now is that tweet. You say, defund them both.
Yes.
You are now running to be district attorney, an office that you hear stated should be defunded.
Right. And so actually, if you read, it's a subtweet of another tweet about Vallejo police who have actually killed a number of people, victims, just like any other victim in the criminal justice system. And the prosecutors in that case failed to do their job. They failed to hold the offenders accountable. And so if you consider, or we consider that the best of policing and the best of prosecution, I just don't agree with that. I think we can do better. And nobody is above the law, whether it's City Hall, people selling drugs in the Tenderloin, or police who break the law. So, you know, I think it was a strong statement, but we can't just say murder is okay because it's a police officer doing it.
Okay, but why did you delete the tweet?
So I'll say when I started the campaign, I used an app, I think it was called Tweet Deleter, that was supposed to remove all my low engagement tweets, but it removed a number of others as well. They are all still online. Nothing ever leaves the internet. And they can be found by anybody who searches. So it wasn't intentional to delete everything from February to August of this year, but there's still 6,000 tweets. If you want to find a bad tweet, I've got one for you.
All right, we'll shift back here and talk about some policy here. Let's talk about the issue of cash bail. Obviously, this has become, you know, a contentious issue in San Francisco. Obviously, Chesa Boudin, you know, moving away from the cash bail system. Do you see yourself continuing down that road if you're elected as DA, or do you see certain circumstances where you might ask a judge to set cash bail?
So, you know, I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about ending cash bail. What that means is generally on low-level offenses where they're setting a nominal bail where offenders can be held in custody, people that have money shouldn't have special privileges over people who don't have money. When cases are more serious, more violent, there's no bail that's being offered in that case. So it's not a matter of cash bail, it's detention or not detention. And actually, the current interim district attorney has adopted Chesa Boudin's plan and is continuing with the no cash bail policy.
I want to talk about something that has a lot of people, you know, I myself live in San Francisco, really concerned, and that is the drug crisis that we're seeing. I've spoken to a lot of people who have lost family members to the opioid crisis. We've heard from the other candidates about how they plan to deal with that. What is your plan for addressing the drug crisis in San Francisco?
Sure. So we have to address the street-level dealing that's occurring in the Tenderloin. You know, when I've been down there as a police commissioner, meeting with residents, it really is a big problem, and people are raising families there. It's not fair to the families to have this going on out there. So, you know, we have to remove the street-level dealers from San Francisco. How we do that is through the police have to arrest them, they bring them to the prosecutor's office, and depending on whether it's a first-time offense or a second-time offense, it's going to be a little bit different. And it's got to be a stronger punishment each successive time, because if people are not changing their behavior, we're going to end up seeing the same thing we're seeing on the streets right now. That's very different than people who are struggling with substance abuse. Now, for those people, we want to get them treatment, we want to get them help. Unfortunately, San Francisco is really low on treatment beds right now, and it's a long wait. So we need the capacity from City Hall to really address the drug crisis on our streets.
Finally, before we go, John, let's talk about the situation in San Francisco when it comes to hate crimes targeting members of the AAPI community. And in light of that, I know one of your campaign promises is to expand victim services at the DA's office, focusing on, among other things, Asian elders, domestic violence victims, others who are vulnerable in the community. Can you describe specifically how your approach would shift here, and what does that mean in terms of additional funding?
Right. So, you know, for me, this is personal. I'm an Asian American. I have been through a hate crime, and I've been through the criminal prosecution side of things. And it was, I lost a lot of faith in our justice system after going through that process. And so I understand what happens. There's a crime that occurs. And the reason victim services is so important is that, you know, with Asian elders or monolingual first generation Chinese, they're not getting the treatment, and the supports and the wraparound services that they need. So, expanding victim services to really bring those people into the system in a way where they leave the system feeling satisfied with the process they've gone through. It is a really serious and difficult problem right now. I have a 93-year-old dad who's here for the summer, and he wanted to know if it was safe to come to San Francisco because everything he's been seeing. We have to change that, and we have to change that by really showing up in the communities, showing up for the Asian American community, and also prosecuting people when they commit these crimes against Asians and elders.
What do you tell your dad about whether it's safe to walk down the street?
I say, I think for the most part it is. I think it really is, happening in certain neighborhoods, and that's a big problem, because I think people are targeting Asian neighborhoods for robberies, for thefts, and for burglaries. And so even though it has happened outside of Asian neighborhoods, and it definitely is, the probability is higher within those Asian neighborhoods, which is why, on the police commission and in other capacities, we've asked for more support, whether it's neighborhood community support or policing to help out with those communities.
All right, John Hamasaki, really appreciate you coming on this show. And important for viewers to get to know all three of the major candidates in this race. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And now that you have heard from those three major candidates, how might this race for DA play out?
All right, coming up here on The Four, our political analyst will join us live with a closer look at the different candidates, the policy proposals that are now front and center, and this limited window for these three candidates to try to reach San Francisco voters before Election Day.